The Death Zone Requiem, when Everest's corpses rose. Chapter 1. The Death Zone Whisper. I should have died on the South Col that night. The jet stream roared overhead like a living saw, gnawing at the tent fabric, and every gust shook snow loose from the ridgeline. Oxygen hissed in my mask, louder than my own blood. My climbing partner, Luis, lay beside me, wrapped in his downsuit, snoring in ragged bursts. Then the radio crackled. A single word. Switchback. Back in the Appalachians where I cut my teeth on winter ascents of the Smokies, switchback was an emergency code. It meant turn around or be turned around. Only 4 people on Earth knew that private signal, and 3 were dead, killed last year in a place called Devil's Elbow, when the mountain seemed to grow teeth and swallow them whole. My gloved hand shook as I lifted the handset. "Who is this?" Static answered first, then a hollow voice. "We're coming up, don't look away." The words scratched at my skull like ice crystals. Luis woke with a start. "You okay, man?" Before I could explain, the wind fell silent, unnaturally, impossibly silent, and something knocked against the tent wall, a frozen boot. It was attached to a leg, and the leg to a body, and the body to a headlamp whose beam shone through milky, glacier-burned eyes. I recognized the face. Its owner had died on the Hillary Step in 1996, a landmark corpse locals called Green Boots. But Green Boots was supposed to be 2,000 feet above us, not tapping politely on our tent flap. Luis screamed. The body leaned closer, cracking ice off its jaw, and whispered in a voice that matched the radio, "Switchback." I smelled rot wafting through nylon. I smelled Appalachia soil too, wet leaves, red clay, the stink of the old ridge where everything started. We unzipped the back of the tent and fled into the moonless dark. Behind us, the corpse and others, so many others, crawled from snowdrifts like sleepers waking late. They moved stiffly, but each gust of wind carried them faster, as if the storm itself dragged them uphill. My only thought was to descend, but the slope had changed. Seracs leaned like crumbling chapel walls, and between them ran a switchback trail I had never seen on any topo. It pointed not down toward Camp 3, but sideways, toward a shadowed col where no expedition ever camped. The radio hissed in my pocket. "Stay on the path," the voice ordered. "Stay on the path to come home." Home meant the Blue Ridge Mountains 3 continents away. Home meant whatever followed us from those woods had poisoned even this holy roof of the world. I kept running, yet every crunch of crampons echoed with Appalachian cicadas, and the cold tasted faintly of southern pine. Luis slipped behind me, tumbling into a crevasse. I never saw him again. When dawn bled over Lhotse, I found myself alone above a graveyard of flags and ice-shattered helmets. The dead were quiet once more, but my footprints were not the only ones in the snow. A second set walked beside mine the whole night, prints shaped like hooves, burned black into the ice. Chapter 2. The Echo Ridge. I limped into Camp 3 at noon, dehydrated and frost-nipped, shouting for help. No tents, no Sherpas, no gear, only prayer flags snapping like bones. A note flapped from the communal cooking table. Scratched in charcoal were 3 symbols: a crooked Y-shaped rune, a spiral, and a cluster of 7 dots. I knew that cluster. It marked the place in the Appalachians where my friends vanished, a clearing locals called the Hollow Mouth. The ridge groaned under sudden weight. Corpses in tattered summit suits hauled themselves over the bergschrund. Their eyes glowed dimly, not red or blue, but a sick green like deep forest glowworms. I dug my ice axe into the crust. "What do you want?" They answered in one voice, wind through hollow lungs. The mountain remembers. The mountain never forgets a promise. In Devil's Elbow, we'd sworn a desperate oath during a whiteout. If one falls, the rest climb higher, no matter what we meet. That reckless vow, forged in fear, had become a contract signed in blood. Arachnid fissures cracked beneath my feet, ley lines stitched across the globe, binding Appalachian shale to Himalayan granite. The dead closed in, forming a semicircle. I swung my axe, but steel met nothing. They dissolved into spindrift, then coalesced behind me. The spiral rune on the note pulsed, and suddenly I smelled rhododendron. A memory surfaced. The Crooked Man legend of Kentucky, a creature that puppeteered corpses. We had buried that story in a shallow grave of disbelief. Apparently, shallow wasn't deep enough. Lightning forked between peaks, though no cloud hung overhead. Each flash revealed new zombies, old-timer Mallory lookalikes in hobnail boots, 1990s commercial climbers with faded logos, Sherpas with prayer beads frozen to their wrists. Generations of ambition, now conscripts of something older than both mountain ranges. I crab-walked toward the yellow band. Thin air rasped in my throat, but the higher I climbed, the weaker the dead grew. At 27,000 feet they sagged, as if gravity suddenly remembered them. So that was the rule. Gain height, steal the breath from unbreathing lungs. I fixed my Jumars and inched up the rope anchored by ghosts of climbers past. Halfway, a hand burst through the ice beside my crampon. Luis's hand. Frostbitten black, missing 2 fingers. He jerked my leg, but the rope held. His face surfaced next, cracked lips mouthing, "Switch back." Tears froze on my cheeks. I cut the safety line with a single swing and let the rope, and whatever clung to it, fall away. At the top of the band, I collapsed on a ledge barely wider than my shoulders. The world below writhed with corpse shadows. Above, the summit pyramid stabbed a sky too dark for midday. I unrolled the note again. The crooked rune looked like a man bending under weight. An Appalachian hermit once told me it symbolized the traveler who goes too far. The spiral meant mouth that swallows paths. Together they formed a map. Go higher to escape the mouth, then bend lower to escape the traveler. In other words, ascend to the summit, descend the other side, and pray the traveler cannot cross into valleys he does not know. I had no choice. I packed 1 flask of melted snow, 3 energy gels, and began climbing toward the balcony, praying my lungs would outpace the mountain's hungry dead. Chapter 3. The Balcony of Bones. I hauled myself above the yellow band as twilight bled violet over the ridgelines. Every breath tasted like rust and moonlit pine needle mulch. Appalachian scents stowed in memories I had buried, but the mountain now dug up with icy fingers. The balcony should have been a cramped snow shelf fit for a 2-man tent, but that night it stretched into a wind-carved arena littered with relics of a century's ambition. A battered oxygen bottle lay half-buried near my boot. Its paint was army green, stamped 1953, first British assault year. A little farther, a Kodak box camera, leather peeling, bellows locked open in a perpetual gasp, blinked glassy lens at the milky sky. Mallory's ghost, perhaps. Helmets, pitons, snapped bamboo poles, an avalanche of decades, all glinting under a drooping crescent moon. And bodies. Dozens. Some crouched on shattered knees as if praying toward the death zone horizon. Others lay fused to the slope, arms out like fallen signposts, faces preserved in rictus awe. Their downsuits had faded to brittle shrouds. Sun-bleached orange, 1990s neon, threadbare gabardine from pre-war expeditions. Yet their eyes were fresh pools of night, unblinking, reflecting the crooked rune I still clutched in my pocket. I knelt by one corpse in an early-era tweed jacket. Fingers black, nose rimed white, but lips moved, cracking as when thin ice splits beneath a footstep. A whisper leaked out, soft as snow dust. The ridge repeats. I leaned closer. What ridge? Switchback. The same forbidden code. Snow billowed from its mouth, and something darker pulsed inside, like pine tar swirling in a jar of meltwater, and I knew the Appalachian thing had nested in this cadaver, using husks as two-legged message beacons. I stumbled away, pulse hammering, lungs barking. At 27,500 feet, panic is poison. Sit, breathe slow, count to 6. Exhale, count to 10. But the dead wouldn't give me 10 counts. The slope trembled. Boots dragged, crampons clinked. One by one, the corpses unfolded, joints popping like frozen twigs. They rose in silence, arrayed themselves in ranks 3 deep, and angled their heads skyward, waiting for an unheard starter's gun. Then the wind howled, not Himalayan jet stream, but an Appalachian night wind, thick with cicada croaks and whip poor-will cries, and the army moved. They did not shamble, they shuffled in geometric formation, each footfall synchronized. Frost powdered off their clothes in rhythmic bursts, a ghost drummer keeping time. They marched not toward the summit, but around me, encircling, tightening the loop like a noose of high-altitude death. At the ring's edge stood Luis, or what Luis had become, skin blue-white, beard frosted into icicles that clinked when he spoke. "Higher," he croaked. "The crooked man wants the crown." I backed to the balcony's lip. 4,000 vertical feet of black emptiness yawned behind. In that gap glimmered faint auroras, green curtains rippling under the jet stream. Yet auroras do not dance at these latitudes. I realized they were lanterns, carried by more bodies zigzagging up unseen gullies, guided by a spiral trail carved into the glacier like a funnel. My axe hit stone. I turned. The outcrop was carved with petroglyphs. Not Tibetan, not Sanskrit, Appalachian runes, exactly like those etched on cliff faces near Devil's Elbow. Looping spirals, crooked Ys, triple dot constellations. Back home, we thought they were Civil War graffiti. Apparently, they were passports. Below one carving, ancient blood had soaked the rock, frozen, thawed, refrozen across eras until it shone ruby under starshine. Words bubbled up from a memory I'd tried to drown in whiskey after my friends died. If the mountain takes, offer passage. If the traveler asks, offer path. Back then we laughed, carved the same stanza into a spruce, and joked about boogeymen. Now the traveler had crossed oceans inside our jokes, hungry for crowns higher than Appalachia could provide. Snow hissed behind me, Luis advancing. He lifted his frost-splintered hand and pointed at the summit cone. His voice was 2 voices, layered, his own baritone and a thin Appalachian drawl I recognized as Garrett's, my body swallowed by the hollow mouth. "Take us up," the duet demanded. "Plant the mark, bridge the range for all time." I glanced at the horde pressing inward. My heartbeat slowed, clarity forming in that hypoxic fog. They could not touch me unless I accepted the pact. The crooked man needs a living mule to carry his rune. Refuse, and maybe the corpses blow away like ash. Accept, and the Himalaya becomes a second hollow mouth. I spat frozen saliva at Luis's boots. Find another mule. Wind exploded, ripping it down and skin. An invisible fist punched the ledge. Fissures spider-webbed through snowpack and ancient limestone. Bodies teetered but did not fall. They stuck like barnacles to the breaking cliff. I belly-crawled to a paling of old prayer flags hammered into the rock, roped my harness to a bent piton from God knows what year. The balcony sheared away with a shriek, dropping 100 corpses and half the supply junk into the abyss. Luis clung to the far edge, one hand impaled on a broken trekking pole, his other arm waving like a flag. He shrieked, "Switch back!" as gravity claimed him. The cry echoed down the Kangshung face, then rose again, farther below, caught by 100 dead throats replaying it like a warped cassette. Silence returned. The surviving dead, only a handful now, crawled to the new edge, but could not cross the fresh chasm. Their eyes dimmed. They sagged to their knees. Without critical mass, the traveler's reach shrank. I had bought time, nothing more. I refilled my lungs with micro sips of bottled O2 and staggered upward. Snow crunched anemically underfoot. My altimeter read 8,600 meters. The balcony plus fracture had lifted me into the summit push sooner than planned. Stars spun overhead like slow sparks. Each inhalation rasped sandpaper over my windpipe, but the crooked rune pulsed warmth against my thigh, a brand of unfinished business. At the south summit, I found a shelf where daylight peeked over the curvature of Earth. Sunbeams ignited stray ice crystals into constellations that mimicked those 7 dots on the rune. I realized the crooked man's map was celestial. In Appalachia, the 7-dot cluster aligned with Orion in winter. Here, aligned with unknown ridges of ice and space, it pointed to the summit ridge's corniced spine. A roar drifted up from below, the undead finding detours, scaling inhuman lines that no living climber would dare. Time had run skinny. I ditched the empty O2 bottle, cinched my mask strap, and stepped onto the Hillary step. Rock and ice glazed in verglas. Halfway up, the ridge widened into a grotto hidden from normal route descriptions. Inside, 30 or 40 bodies knelt in rows like monks before an altar. Some wore military greatcoats, others synthetic suits. All sang, a drone of guttural vowels that rattled my sternum. The runes carved into their cheeks oozed tar. At the grotto center stood a cairn of skulls, weather-bleached human skulls, each engraved with the crooked Y. Tied atop the cairn fluttered a prayer flag, not of silk, but Appalachian kudzu vine, leaves dead yet unwilted, green veins glowing faintly. A bridge indeed, vine from American soil rooted in Himalayan bone. I wanted to torch it, smash every skull, but my strength was a spent match, and that choir song hammered nails behind my eyes. I shuffled by, eyes averted, clinging to sanity's frayed tether. 4:03 a.m., by my watch long since frozen. The final rise eased, and there it was, the peak of the world, a mound no bigger than a pool table dusted with hoarfrost and rainbow prayer ribbons. Yet sunrise revealed another peak. No, the same peak superimposed with another, gentle Appalachian slope crowned by a fire tower. A double exposure, blink one way, Tibetan plateau, thin gold dawn. Blink the other, blue ridge at dusk, amber haze smelling of sweetgrass. Standing at their intersection, I felt gravitational pull both ways. The crooked man wanted me to plant the rune in that overlap, staple his 2 hunting grounds into one endless feeding loop. My gloves shook as I took the rune from my pocket. Its edges glimmered red. It sang the switchback radio code in Morse against my skin. ... .. I raised it high and hurled it not onto the snow but into open sky. For a heartbeat it hovered, yanked by rival gravities. Then a hand, skeletal, blackened, shot from thin air and seized the charm. Garrett's hand, tattoo of a snake on the forearm still visible through frostbite. He stood balanced on nothing, halfway between continents. Appalachian boots planted on invisible trail, Himalayan spindrift swirling waist deep. His grin was a split mask. "You owe me a summit photo, partner." He crushed the rune, shards scattering into dawn wind like iron snowflakes. Below, the choir screamed. The chasm corpses writhed. Luis's distant echo bent into a howl. The bridge was broken, but so was the last tether holding Garrett to death. Wind sucked him backward. He dissolved into dust that flew west toward the Smokies. The choir fell silent. One by one, the dead on the mountain toppled, final dust devils vanishing into gullies. I stood alone, lungs heaving vacuum, no oxygen left, no partner, no rope, but alive. And then the miracle. A gust carried warm, pine-scented air over the summit cone. I inhaled, no frostbite in the breath, no blood taste. The mountain exhaled in relief, as though rid of a parasite. Yet I knew parasites evolve. Across the ocean, in hollows and switchbacks, travelers still walked at dusk, and they would find another foothold. My duty now was witness. I took one photo, sunrise haloing prayer flags and the faint imprint where Garrett had stood. Then I began the long, lonely descent, whispering the story into my recorder so future climbers would learn. When you hear a code you thought was secret, turn around. When you smell pine on high-altitude wind, kneel and pray. And when the crooked man offers you a crown, give him empty sky instead. I am still walking, still breathing, but the rune's dust scratches inside my coat lining, reminding me the pact is wounded, not dead. If you're reading this, remember that the highest peaks are stitched to the darkest hollows, and every oath echoes forever. Chapter 4. The Return Ridge. I began my descent alone, feet numb inside crampons, oxygen cylinder empty, but slung across my back as ballast so the wind wouldn't flip me from the ridge. Thin dawn painted the summit cone gold, but farther below, shadows pooled in every couloir like ink too heavy to run. Clouds boiled up from Tibet, sealing the world in a grey lid. The south summit vanished in cotton. Each step down the fixed line felt like a step into a half-remembered forest. I kept hearing Appalachian night sounds, owls, whip-poor-wills, the distant clang of a farmhouse gate, yet every direction showed only ice and rock. My mind was starving for sea-level oxygen, yes, but I knew the crooked man liked to lace hallucinations with fragments of home. They were breadcrumbs that led straight into his mouth. I clipped past the top anchor of the Hillary Step. The grotto below, where the choir of husks had sung, looked empty now, except for a single prayer flag of Appalachian kudzu still draped over the skull cairn. The vine had darkened from green to near black, as though frost couldn't touch it but the sun could char it. I wanted to tear it down, burn it, scatter its ashes across the jet stream. Instead, I kept moving. At 28,000 feet, anger is heavier than granite. Halfway down the step, my right crampon caught on a knot of brittle rope left by an expedition years ago. The jolt sent a hot lance through my calf. I steadied myself, glanced left, and nearly slipped again. A man in a red summit suit dangled 10 meters away, anchored by a fresh purple static line I hadn't seen on the way up. His visor reflected milky white, no face. Wind rocked him like a puppeteer testing slack. "Need a hand?" I croaked, absurd reflex. The visor turned toward me, and mist drifted inside the helmet, mist that billowed out the neck seal like chimney smoke. He lifted one arm, beckoned. The motion was too smooth, too living. I leaned closer. The arm was not bone and flesh. It was braided kudzu vine wearing a glove. A gust shoved me sideways, snapping the old rope free. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Only the purple line remained, frozen into the ice and vanishing downward toward the balcony fracture. New roots already spreading. The crooked man was reseeding the mountain even after the rune had shattered. I climbed faster, quads on fire. At the balcony rim, a makeshift Tyrolean traverse now spanned the chasm that had opened when the ledge broke away. Something had strung 3 climbing ropes side by side, anchored with pitons hammered into bare limestone. On the far side, 11 bodies waited in a row. I counted 7 Western climbers in faded gear, 4 Sherpas in patched downs. Their heads lolled, but each held an ice tool planted like a staff, guardians of the bridge. A radio buzzed in my chest pocket, the same frequency the dead had hijacked 2 nights earlier. "Traveler welcomes you home," it rasped. I yanked the antenna out. The horde didn't move. Maybe they needed the voice command, or maybe they were waiting for night. I chose the leftmost rope, looked newer. I clipped 2 carabiners, slid across hand over hand. Halfway, the wind surged, and the center rope snapped, slithering into the abyss. The guardians twitched but stayed planted. Frost slicked my gloves. I almost lost purchase. I whispered the old ridge mantra. 3 points, breathe, 3 points. At last, my crampons scraped the opposite lip. The nearest guardian raised his head. It was Mallory-era Tweed man, the Whisperer. His jaw opened, but no sound came. His throat was stuffed with vine that squirmed like feeding worms. I swung my axe. Steel met ice. The body shattered like sugar glass vines unraveling into the gale. The other 10 guardians faltered, as if a control line had been cut, then slumped where they stood. I stumbled downslope to Camp 4. The plateau looked abandoned at first, but then I saw motion. A yellow North Face tent shivered, zipper jittering open and shut like teeth. I unzipped it carefully. Inside, a sat phone blinked low battery beside an untouched bowl of instant noodles frozen solid. No bodies, only a message scrawled on the tent wall in black marker. We heard singing under the ice. Went to look. If we're not back by dawn, cut the ropes. No signature. I rummaged for supplies, found half a bottle of O2, 2 energy bars, and a frayed Tibetan prayer wheel. I spun the wheel. The tiny bell tinkled once, then the spindle cracked. Dust, not paper dust, but Appalachian red clay, puffed out. I gagged. Clouds closed around the camp, and the plateau dimmed. Shapes moved between shredded tents, shapes that croaked my name in Garrett's voice. Cam, they rasped. Switchback. Switchback. The word echoed off ice walls until it became a drum line. I dropped a flare, bathed the plateau in orange fire glow. The shapes recoiled, their suits smoking where the light touched. So, fire hurt them. I emptied both flare tubes into the cluster. Crimson fountain erupted, turning snow to slush. Corpses writhed, vines blistered. The crooked man screamed through 100 rented throats, a sound like steel cables snapping under load. I cut every fixed rope leading lower and kicked the anchors loose. The path behind me would now be a vertical grave for anything that tried to follow, and maybe for me if I slipped. But the only way out was down, and the only safe corridor lay on a seldom-used variant route called the Geneva Spur Couloir. Steep, bullet-hard, avalanche-prone. Better a natural killer than a supernatural puppeteer. On the spur's ice slope, I down-climbed facing in, front points biting like sewing needles. Wind carried smells from 2 continents, juniper from Tibetan valleys, honeysuckle from Appalachian hollers. The crooked man was stretching again, feeling for a new bridge. 2 pitches below, a body hung on a half-buried rope, headphoneless, radio clipped to harness. I recognized the orange shell, Hitoshi, a Japanese soloist we'd greeted at base camp a week ago. He'd planned a no O2 ascent. His face was serene as if he'd died mid-meditation. I reached to check for pulse, foolish habit, but he moved first. Eyes snapped open, pupils glowed green. His gloved hand clamped my wrist with inhuman torque. His lips parted, vines spat like tongues. I yanked free, but not before seeing something else inside his mouth. A Polaroid photo, edges blood wet. I fished it out with an ice screw. It showed me and Garrett back in the Smokies, grinning at a trailhead, date stamped 5 years prior. Across the image, words had been etched with a pin, debt pays downward. Lightning flashed, though no storm. When vision cleared, the body was gone, rope cut, Hitoshi tumbling silently through spindrift into the void. The photo remained in my gauntlet, pulsing heat like a coal. I shoved it into an inner pocket, next to my recorder. Witness evidence. Hours blurred. Crampons slipped, but held. Once a serac above groaned and split. Ice blocks rained, and I flattened against the slope. None hit me. The crooked man wanted me alive. Debt collector, not assassin. At last, the spur eased into the western terminal. Camp 2's battered tents dotted the glacier floor, looking like children's toys after a fire. As I staggered closer, I saw that every tent pole was a snapped femur. Human. The fabric. Stitched patchwork of summit suits peeled from corpses. Camp 2 was now a charnel shrine. At its center, a single expedition banner fluttered, the logo of my own Appalachian climbing club. How had it reached Nepal? Garrett again. Vines had no customs limits. Amid the horror, one miracle gleamed. A lone climber crouched behind a rock outcrop, waving. Sherpa Ngawang from another team, face streaked with tears but alive. He pressed a finger to his lips, pointed at the banner. We crawled into a crevasse mouth and whispered. He'd seen the dead rise before dawn, had fled here, too afraid to move. I shared a bar. He shared intel. The corpses didn't cross running meltwater. Something about flowing water broke their coherence, a familiar bit of Appalachian lore. Ghosts can't pass streams. The crooked man, despite oceans, still bowed to old rules. Plan formed, reach the icefall ladders before dusk, cross the Khumbu torrent while sunmelt still surged. If we made it, maybe the dead would stall at the edge like wolves fearing a river in flood. We crept from the crevasse. Shadows stirred among bone tents, but none chased. Perhaps the puppet strings were snarled. Perhaps the crooked man was nursing vine burns from my flares. Either way, we had a head start measured in heartbeats. Ngawang and I roped together, angled across crevasse fields pocked with blue melt pools. I recited psalms I'd heard in mountain churches back home, words not of faith, but of pattern. Patterns keep madness out. At 5 p.m., the icefall loomed, a frozen maze lit by sundogs. Ladders clattered in the wind. We were crossing the second span when radios everywhere erupted, a choir of static, then one clear voice. Luis, Garrett, myself. I couldn't tell, repeating a new code. Spur to hollow, gate unclosed. Ngawang froze. The air around us warmed, smelled of rhododendron and camp stove coffee. Vines slithered up ladder rungs like vipers. I slashed with my axe, severing green coils, screamed at Ngawang to move. He obeyed. We jumped the last meter, snowplowed into the next platform. The ladder behind us drooped, half consumed by kudzu that should never grow above sea level. It writhed, seeking soil. Finding none, it blackened, cracked, fell away into the crevasse, taking the radio voices with it. Downslope, meltwater gushed. We sprinted, heels sliding, lungs ablaze. At the foot of the icefall, a torrent roared, a muddy, glacier-fed river thrashing through jumbled ice blocks. We clipped onto the single remaining Tyrolean cable strung above. No time for harness. We slung arms and legs over, pulling hand over hand as frigid spray lashed faces. Mid-span. I looked back. Figures lined the icefall crest, dozens, maybe hundreds watching. The crooked man's silhouettes. One stepped forward into a shaft of alpenglow. Green boots, face waxy, eyes blazing pine torch green. He raised an arm, but when his boot touched running water fanning out from under the cable, steam hissed and he recoiled. The horde bellowed. The mountain answered with an avalanche rumble. But none stepped farther. The rule held. Moving water is a wall ink can't cross. Ngawang and I hauled onto the far bank, collapsed in moraine mud. The roar of the stream drowned every whisper of the undead. Dusk bled into star swirl. We were alive, for now. Yet I knew rivers freeze overnight. Come dawn, the barrier would seal, and the crooked man would march again. We had one night to reach base camp, torch every vine, radio the world, and pray the hollow mouth stayed plugged. I flicked my recorder on, spoke to future ears. Day 4 on the descent. If you find this, know that evil roots can leap ridges, oceans, ages. Burn them in fire, drown them in rivers, but never, never carry them for a friend. Debt pays downward, and the balance is always collected. Ngawang crossed himself, whispered a Himalayan prayer. I added an Appalachian amen. 2 mountains, 1 hope. Keep the gate closed. We rose and limped into the glacier night, chased by silence more terrifying than any scream. Chapter 5. Night of the Frozen Gate. The stream roared like a freight train all night, yet I barely slept 10 minutes. Ngawang and I found a hollow between seracs, lit the last stove cartridge, and sipped half-thawed soup that tasted of rust. My hands shook so hard the cup clacked against my teeth. We took turns keeping watch. Whenever it was my shift, I aimed my headlamp back toward the icefall. Most of the corpses had vanished from the ridge, but a few remained. Silent silhouettes, heads tilted as though sniffing wind. One held a coil of rope, feeding it hand over hand into the darkness, measuring the gap like a surveyor planning a bridge. Moonlight glinted off water. The torrent still ran, but chunks of surface ice thickened, knitting white veins across the flow. The night was plunging to 30°, nature itself working for the crooked man. Just after 100 hours, a noise like tearing silk drifted on the wind. I swung the lamp. Letters were appearing on a pristine drift, carved by invisible claws. SPURTOHOLLOWCHASMCLOSESCROWNTHEWATCH. Each word scratched itself deeper until blood seeped up, as though the snow were skin. I kicked fresh powder over the message, but a second set of letters immediately scored the surface. DEBTPAYSNOW. Ngawang muttered a prayer and spun a money wheel he'd salvaged. Its bell rang once, snapped off, fell silent. By 0300, the river had narrowed to a black vein between plates of new ice. Slabs groaned, welding. A film of hoarfrost spread over the cable we'd used. Ngawang tapped my shoulder, pointed. First corpse stepped onto the far riverbank, green boots again, leading. He pressed one boot onto fresh ice. It held. He advanced another step, then another. No steam, no recoil, rule broken. Ngawang grabbed the flare gun, one cartridge left, and fired. The red comet arced, hissed, struck ice at green boots' feet. The corpse burst in sudden flame, vines shriveling like paper snakes. But 5 more dead stepped around the blaze. The crooked man was willing to lose pawns. We had maybe 20 minutes before the ice bridge finished setting. We packed by feel, sprinted over glacial undulations toward the tiny constellation of tents that marked base camp. Normally, it lay a lazy day's walk below Camp 2. Adrenaline turned it into a frantic crawl. My quads screamed. Ngawang's crampon strap snapped. He ran 1 foot spiked, 1 foot bare rubber, slipping every third step. The Khumbu icefall creaked behind, a chorus of shifting towers. That same chorus now echoed with voices. Switchback, switchback. I refused to look. We crested a mound and saw lights, 2 headlamps moving inside the base camp perimeter. Living people. I shouted. Both lamps swept toward us, then waved wildly. Rescuers. No, 2 climbers from a French team who'd aborted earlier in the week, Caroline and Mark, pale and frantic. They dragged fuel barrels into a heap near the helipad. Gasoline, kerosene, toot, Caroline panted. We burn everything. They'd seen the dead at dawn the previous day, locked themselves in a comms tent, and monitored weird HF transmissions ever since. They believed fire and width of flat moraine kept corpses at bay for now. Ngawang explained our river would soon freeze, that an avalanche of bodies was inbound. Mark cursed, rummaged for sat phone, dialed Lukla Heliops. No answer, just a loop of garbled Morse. Then the loop suddenly spat our own secret code. Switchback, switchback. The crooked man had hijacked the civilian band. We can't rely on rescue, I said. We make a wall of fire. We dragged every fuel drum, every box of propane canisters, every scrap tarp, and ringed the up-glacier edge of camp. Caroline soaked prayer flags in white gas, wove them into a fuse. At 0430, a blizzard of stars wheeled overhead. Horizon in the east grew indigo. From that indigo rose a black tide. Hundreds of figures staggering down the CWM, spilling across Sastrugi like ants. Some still wore full-face shields, others were bone-gleaming under moon. Every few seconds one stumbled, broke a brittle limb, but vines re-knit joint to tendon, and they lurched on. Ngawang lit the fuse with a flint spark. Flame zipped along soaked cloth, kissed the first drum. Whump! A mushroom of orange punched the sky, heat slap hard even through down. The ring ignited section by section, a sunrise of man-made hell. Snow hissed into vapor, moraine rocks glowed. Corpses hit the line, ignited like scarecrows. Smell of burning hair and rotten meat rolled over us. Many fell, but others climbed flaming comrades, vines shielding them like living hoses of sap. Mark yelled, pointed. Segments where drums had been half-filled sputtered, flame guttering. The undead funneled toward these weak links, piling bodies onto fire until weight smothered it. I sprinted to the comms tent, grabbed a flare cluster and an old climbing rope soaked in kerosene. Lit one end, swung it overhead like an ember-spitting sling, ran to the breach, lashed the rope across, creating a curtain of sparks. A corpse wearing Luis's face charged through. The rope seared across his chest. Vines burst, oozed black resin that ignited blue. He kept coming. I buried my ice axe under his chin and levered. His neck snapped, head toppled into the fire gutter, but torso still clawed. Mark dumped a propane can, shot it with a flare pistol, white flash, torso shredded. But for every fallen, 3 more pressed. At Aero 515, rotor thunder rose from the valley, an Mi-17 freight chopper, red beacon sweeping. Pilot risked pre-dawn up-valley run despite no fly orders. Maybe Lukla Tower never heard the corrupted transmissions. Maybe God pitied us. Pad was 30 meters past the flame ring. We would have to punch through the undead to reach it. Caroline grabbed a snow shovel, scooped burning gel, splashed a fiery path. Ngawang and I flanked, axes out, Mark hauling the sat phone battery pack like a club. We sprinted. Corpses lunged. I swung, severed shoulder vines, kicked legs out. Heat blistered my cheeks, goggles fogged on inside, but outside surface instantly froze, turning vision into kaleidoscope. I switched to muscle memory. Thrust, pull, step. Rotor wash blasted the scene, sweeping sparks and snow. Skids kissed ice, pilot barely maintaining hover. Side door slid. Loadmaster waved, eyes saucer-wide. Caroline dove first, Mark after. Ngawang stumbled. Green boots snagged his ankle. I chopped at the corpse's wrist. Axe glanced off frozen tendon. Ngawang screamed. 2 more corpses seized the hem of his parka, vines threading fabric like sewing needles, stitching him to them. I clipped my safety line to the skid, leaned back, grabbed Ngawang's harness loop. Pulled with everything left. Cloth tore, but vines held. Green boots hissed Appalachian words, hollow mouth, and vines surged up Ngawang's legs like ivy on brick. Loadmaster tossed a cargo hook. I snapped it onto Ngawang's chest strap, signaled thumbs up. Pilot throttled. Rotor blast lifted us. The helicopter, me on skid, Ngawang dangling between living and dead. Green boots lost footing, vines snapping like banjo strings. He slammed into ice, skull fracturing. A geyser of dry spores, kudzu seeds, spun upward, sucked into rotor wash, peppered us. Some hit my neck, stung like nettles. I brushed frantically, feeling microbarbs trying to root in skin. At last, Ngawang swung clear. I hauled him onto skid deck, rolled him inside. Door slammed. Interior smelled of jet fuel and fear. Pilot banked hard downhill, blades chopping pre-dawn gloom. We climbed to 20,000 feet, circled once. Below, base camp burned like a signal flare to satellites. The undead ring milled, cut off from fresh meat but not retreating. Some raised arms, vines weaving into crude antennae that pointed at us, trying to snag the metal bird with superstition. They failed. Altitude, speed, and thin air their new running water. Ngawang sobbed thanks. Caroline stared catatonic. Mark taped the cabin windows with gaffer tape, muttering, "No spores in, no spores." I checked my neck. 3 seed barbs embedded like splinters. I dug them out with a pocket knife, flicked them into a sample vial. Evidence. Pilot yelled over the intercom. Stormfront inbound, need to divert Pokhara, refuel, maybe quarantine. He'd heard our radio chatter while inbound, understood we carried something worse than frostbite. I opened my recorder, spoke to it through chattering teeth. Chapter 5. Fire held them, river slowed them, but ice and vine grow fast together. The crooked man can cross water when water sleeps. Now he tests flight. If you're hearing this anywhere near the Blue Ridge or the Himalaya, remember, flame, flow, daylight. Keep them separate. Keep yourself alive. I snapped the recorder shut and glanced east. Sunrise painted the Annapurna Range blood orange. For a moment, those peaks overlapped in my vision with ridges of Appalachia, as though the world's mountains were angling inward, points of a dark crown tightening around the globe. We had escaped 1 tooth of that crown. 3 more chapters of my tale remain, and the crooked man writes his own endings. Pray I outrun his pen. Chapter 6. Valley of Mirrors. Rotor blades screamed over terraced hillsides as the Mi-17 thundered toward Pokhara. Morning haze clung to the Annapurna Massif like a gauze bandage. Through it, I glimpsed a shape that wasn't a mountain, an outline of Blue Ridge summits hovering translucent behind Himalayan ridges, as if 2 landscapes overlapped on faulty film. The crooked man was stitching again. The pilot radioed the civil tower. Only static and the faint, maddening pulse of our code, ... answered. He cursed, squelched the set, and dropped altitude. Rice paddies sparkled below, bright green discs interrupted by silver irrigation canals, moving water good. Yet the paddies were ringed by dry stone walls that funneled flow. If the water slowed, the vine could root. I looked at my companions. Caroline, lips cracked, eyes glassy, clutching a flare pistol. Mark, fumbling with his sat phone, thumb raw from redialing. Ngawang, slumped, parka shredded where vines had needled him. I'd cut most tendrils out, but 3 punctures remained. Dark rings crusted round tiny holes. Infection or germination? We touched down on a deserted helipad behind the airport. No ground crew. Windsock ripped free, flapping like a stripped prayer flag. Pilot shouted that he'd keep rotors hot for 5 minutes. After that, fuel ran out and we were on our own. Terminal windows were spider-webbed with cracks, as if something had pounded from inside. We ducked through a service door, emergency lights flickering. Baggage belts were still. A generator somewhere coughed but never caught. On the floor, chalk arrows and Nepali script spelled C-19 checkpoint, ghost of an old pandemic station. Yet here no officials waited, only abandoned thermometers and toppled barricades. Footprints of red mud led away, booted and barefoot intermingled. At intervals the mud thickened into chunks of vine pulp. Something had marched a motley procession through the terminal, shedding parts, maybe sprouting recruits. We reached the control room. Radios hummed with layered voices, all repeating regional traffic instructions, then segueing into Appalachian folk songs in minor key versus bent and reversed. A spectral DJ weaving sky paths into holler tunes. Mark ripped cables out, silencing the feed. Caroline scanned the flight board. Every entry read HLD, field closed, 31 deck, though today was July. Time fracture. The crooked man was smearing calendars as well as maps. Ngawang swayed, sweat soaked his collar despite the cool morning. He muttered fragments of Tibetan scripture, then suddenly spoke perfect Kentucky drawl. "Hollow's open again, partner. Owe me that photo." He blinked, horrified. His voice returned to normal. "Something speaks through me." Caroline pulled his hood back. The puncture rings had swollen to coin-sized welts, emerald capillaries spidering outward. We had hours at most before vines breached skin. Burn or cut. Burn risked killing him now. We needed medicine, maybe antifungal, maybe nothing on earth. Yet I'd seen fire stall the crooked man's advance. A compromise, cauterize partially, starve spores, pray. I heated a multi-tool blade with a camp stove lighter until it glowed, pressed it to each welt. Ngawang clenched teeth. Flesh sizzled, released a smell of pine sap and blood. A vapor of green motes escaped, spiraled toward the ceiling vent. Caroline blasted them with torch spray, flame whooshing blue. The motes popped like fat in a skillet. Ngawang passed out but kept breathing. Wounds stopped spreading, for now. We dragged fuel canisters from airport storage and doused entry doors, making a perimeter fire line. Then we scouted the main road into town. Silence. But cattle lay along ditches, eyes filmed, mouths packed with vine like green gag cloth. Parasite had tried but failed to animate them. Wrong physiology. Still, spores infested every carcass. Ahead, Fewa Lake shimmered, a vast mirror reflecting snow peaks. Too wide to freeze quickly, fed by mountain streams. A perfect barrier. But near the eastern shore, a landfill jutted, forming a makeshift causeway of compacted trash and soil. On satellite maps that didn't exist. The crooked man had built his bridge. Garbage, driftwood, even wrecked tents from base camp woven with kudzu to create a spit of land just high enough to keep feet dry. Across that spit shuffled a line of silhouettes heading inland. Binoculars showed them clearly, a mix of high-altitude corpses and fresh villagers, eyes glowing the same fungal green. They carried burlap bundles, seed sacks, tossing handfuls into roadside ditches, sowing the valley, and at their center walked green boots, torso scorched but functional, dragging a CB radio nailed to a bamboo pole, portable transmitter spelling switchback across the FM band. If they reached forested hills beyond Pokhara, vines would find global highways of root and mycelium. Appalachia's curse would seed the world. We needed to break the bridge. Only one tool big enough, the hydropower dam upriver at the Seti Gorge. Open floodgates, raise lake level, drown the spit. Flowing water again. Mark knew the route. His team had visited the dam for altitude acclimatization jogs, 10 kilometers upriver. We commandeered a jeep, siphoned diesel, loaded flares and gasoline. Pilot wished us luck. He'd try to ferry any other survivors south. "Burn anything green," he shouted over rotor roar, then lifted off. We barreled through empty bazaar streets. Shop fronts were smashed. Prayer wheels spun unattended. From alley radios leaked bluegrass riffs reversed, always reversing. Street dogs barked, then whimpered, tails between legs. Tire tracks of dusty green slime led same direction, toward the gorge. The undead convoy had wheeled carts of seed. We'd catch them or overtake. Either way, confrontation loomed. Ngawang stirred, asked hoarsely for water. I gave him a sip, laced with iodine. He grimaced. Dreamed of the crooked man wearing prayer beads of human teeth. He builds a crown of 8 peaks, Everest, Annapurna, Kanchenjunga, and 5 ridges of the Blue Ridge. When crown closes, night lasts forever. 8 peaks, 8 chapters. My testimony might itself be part of his design. Story as spell. I resolved to finish the tale with an ending not of his making. At kilometer 6, a wooden arch spanned the road, tourist spot, where trekkers tie flags. Now the arch sagged under bodies lashed crosswise, intestines braided into extra rope. Corpse roadblock. Caroline braked. Behind us, dust column rose, pursuers. I grabbed binoculars. Yes, a cadre of villagers, maybe 50, jogging with mechanical rhythm. Time short. We had to ram. Mark floored pedal. Jeep smashed into arch, wood splintering, bodies spinning away. Green fluid sprayed windshield, vine sap, not blood. The arch collapsed behind us, sealing the pursuing group for a moment. Several clambered over debris, oblivious to shattered limbs. They would keep coming. Up ahead, cliffs tightened, road carved into gorge wall. Perfect choke, but also a death trap if we stalled. We passed a sign, SETI Hydro 3 km. Heartbeats counted distance. The concrete monolith loomed, sluice gates chained since monsoon season ended. Turbine hum muted, grid offline. But control rooms might still run on backup. We skidded into the service yard. Corpses already here. 3 climbers in Sherpa gear, drilling vines into control room door. We jumped out swinging ice axes. Caroline fired a flare, head burst, spores puffed. I smashed skulls. Mark doused vine roots with diesel and lit. Ngawang hobbled behind, carrying sat phone battery rig like a bomb. His eyes clearer. Heat cautery had slowed spread. Inside, emergency lights glowed red. Control panel gauges at minimal power. We needed to lift spillway gates fast. Mark found manual crank instructions scrawled for blackouts. Release 3 safety lugs. Ratchet wheel until marker hits 45. But wheel cylinders were jammed with green stems. I hacked vines away. Sap burned skin like acid. Caroline and Mark levered bars. Gears groaned, began turning. Outside, roar of pursuit grew. Horde entering yard, beating on corrugated walls. The dam itself amplified their chant. Switchback, crown the watch. Wheel mark hit 45. We slammed main switch. Deep inside concrete bowels, servos clanked. River thunder surged. I ran to observation slit. Lake level rising, water spilling over initial lip, overtopping the landfill spit in distance. Undead lines splintered, some creatures swept off feet, vines unraveling in current. But others clung to trees, immune to knee-deep flow. We needed maximum discharge. Safety interlock required second wheel across turbine hall. We sprinted catwalks. Doors below exploded inward. Horde had breached. Green boots led, radio hissing morse. Vines speared forward like grappling hooks, latching railings. One tendril wrapped my ankle. Caroline chopped it, yanked me along. At second wheel, we repeated crank, but vines burst through floor grates, tangling spokes. Mark yelled for bolt cutters. None. Ngawang stepped forward, shoved sat phone battery rig into the vine mass. Overcharge, he said, and crossed 2 wires with blade tip. Sparks, scream of circuitry, then explosion, battery casings shattering, arc flash igniting vine sludge. Blue-white fireball raced down grates, incinerating roots, jolting wheel free. Mark and I spun it wildly. Gauge hit red. Hydraulic pistons slammed gates open. Outside, Seti River roared like falling sky. A wall of muddy water raced downstream, 20 feet high, scouring landfill spit. Corpses tumbled like sticks. Vines tore free, floating, then dissolving as current ripped chlorophyll apart. Green boot stood 1 second too long, radio antenna sparking against rushing spray. His body shattered, helmet tumbling like a buoy before vanishing. Lake mirrored the Blue Ridge no longer. Superimposed ridges blinked out as watery chaos erased the fixed reflection. The stitch had ripped. Victory cost. Ngawang lay against railing, face lit by electrical burns, breathing in rattled sips. The cauterized punctures had reopened, weeping tarry sap. Vines within him were dying, but so was he. He pressed recorder button on my chest. Tell them. Prayer wheels spin both ways. Spin wrong direction. Summon reverse shadow. He coughed blood. I spun mine backward that day in camp. Mistake. His eyes closed. Heartbeat stilled. Vines twitched once, withered. Debt paid downward. I closed his lids, whispered an Appalachian amen and a Tibetan mani. Caroline traced a blessing sign on his forehead. Mark wrenched door bars shut. Outside hallway echoed with dying vine shrieks like cicadas at season's end, gradually dimming. Backup generator sputtered to life. Wheel friction had jarred fuel lines. I tuned shortwave to emergency band, transmitted. This is Cam Biwaum, survivor of Everest and Pokhara outbreak. Live vine pathogen connected to Appalachian hollow mouth neutralized at Seti Gorge. Flooding effective. Burn and flow remain primary containment. Beware of code word switchback. Do not follow any broadcast instructing to crown the watch. Repeat. Do not spin prayer wheels backward. Do not carve crooked Y runes. Static answered. Then a faint voice. Female American accent. Copy. Blue Ridge Field Station here. We've had vine sightings near Black Balsam Knob. Your message confirms link. We are lighting back burns now. The line cut. The Crown's other tooth was awake, but so were the defenders. We stepped outside. Dawn over Seti Gorge sparkled on new rapids. Where Landfill Bridge once stood was only churning water dotted with vine foam, rapidly bleaching to gray. Caroline laughed. First genuine sound in days, then sobbed. Mark wrapped her in an arm, eyes hollow but alive. Overhead, cloud shapes shifted. For an instant I saw outline of a crooked Y unravel, turning to smoke. Not gone forever, only retreating. Evil rarely dies. It limps home to sharpen knives. I recorded the final log of the chapter. Section 6 completed. River restored, fire spent. But spores can ride wind farther than mountains. Next we head for Kathmandu Embassy to courier evidence vial. Pine-barbed seeds, Ngawang's blood sample, recorder logs. If labs can crack the genome, we may craft fungicide. Until then, trust running water, trust flame, mistrust every friendly voice on dead radio. The crooked man may borrow your accent next. We began the trek down Serpentine Road, 3 figures against a valley rinsed clean, at least for one sunrise. Behind us, dam turbines groaned louder, and I heard, maybe imagined, the faint plucking of a banjo carried on headwater mist. The tune faltered, off-key, as though someone's strings had snapped. For now, the crooked man had lost his mountain crown, but Appalachia still waited dusk, and night comes faster on that side of the world. 2 chapters left to teach the world how to keep crowns broken. Pray we reach the microphone in time. Chapter 7. The Return to the Hollow Mouth. A week passed on paper. Inside my skull it felt like a single, unblinking night. The U.S. Air Force cargo plane that ferried us out of Kathmandu had no windows, just riveted aluminum humming under jet roar. Caroline dozed, head on her knees. Mark sorted vials in a biohazard pouch, labeling them for the CDC. I sat between palletized crates of relief supplies, repeating Bible verses and trail mantras in whispers, because silence let the crooked man creep into thought. The loadmaster, Sergeant Ruiz, briefed us over the intercom. Direct hop to Dover, decontamination, then transfer to a FEMA field lab in Asheville, North Carolina, chosen for its proximity to the Blue Ridge outbreak. Containment fires already ringed affected hollers. National Guard units were dynamiting beaver dams to keep streams moving. It was a war, and water was artillery. I cradled Ngawang's recorder in my lap. His final words were now evidence, and maybe instruction for whoever would take the next watch. I'd promised his spirit I'd finish the story. Promises I'd learned were living things to the crooked man, nutrient-rich roots he could tap unless burned with truth. Mid-flight, the plane lurched. Captain's voice crackled from cockpit. Turbulence over the Atlantic. But I felt something else. Pressure shift I'd known on Everest when the dead rose. I unbuckled, fought gravity's wobble, slid the cargo curtain aside. At the tail ramp, a lone parachute pack lay where no parachutist should be. Its straps writhed, green cords slithering like worms hunting seams. A vine. The plane had been seeded. I yelled for help. Ruiz and 2 airmen in mop suits rushed, weapons raised. A tendril snapped out, snared Ruiz's ankle, yanked him off his feet. The vine hissed, spitting spores like steam. I grabbed a rigging knife from a wall sheath, slashed the cord. Green sap sprayed. The severed end retracted, thrashing. Ruiz cursed in Spanish, limped clear, but the vine dove into a ventilation grate. Where did it draw water at 33,000 feet? It didn't need water, it needed fear. And we had spilled plenty across continents. I sprinted to the cockpit hatch, reported the breach. Captain ordered emergency descent toward an Icelandic airstrip for fumigation. But his co-pilot, voice distant, asked, "Why divert? We're already over the Blue Ridge ridgeline." Static swallowed the channel. We were nowhere near North America. The crooked man now spoofed instrument readouts. The captain slapped analog backups, confirmed we were indeed mid-Atlantic. He armed extinguishers in all ducts, compressed CO2 capable of flash-freezing vine tissue. We sealed helmets, braced. Pilots vented canisters. Frost crystals danced through cabin vents, coating cargo nets in silver. Green tendrils protruding from grates stiffened, cracked, fell like dry twigs. The plane leveled. Vine motion ceased. But Caroline coughed violently, pulling her mask away too late. Tiny green barbs dotted her cheek. Another seed had hitched a ride. We burned each barb with a soldering iron. Skin blistered. She didn't scream, just hissed through teeth. "Get me to the hollow before it gets me." Dover quarantine tents smelled of bleach and diesel. Hazmat techs scrubbed us, drew blood. CDC doctor emerged, paint stripper fumes on his gloves, and said we were negative, for now. Our clothes incinerated, we received fatigues with bio-hoods and boarded a black-windowed bus south. The CDC doctor rode along, muttering his notes. Through cracked vinyl seats, I read the front-page headline in a discarded newspaper. "Ghost vines choke Appalachia, evacuations ordered." A map showed infection arcs radiating from a single red X. Devil's Elbow, Kentucky, the hollow mouth. This was ground zero, the crooked man's seat of power, now reawakened by Himalayan soil under its nails. Our bus convoy wound into the mountains at dusk. Guard posts every few miles flamed roadside debris, controlled burns to sterilize ditch water. In valleys, slurry bombers dumped bleach and copper sulfate onto kudzu tangles glowing faintly after dark. Still, radio chatter said new nodes kept lighting up. Churchyards, mine shafts, even abandoned moonshine stills. Anywhere promises had been made and broken. We reached the perimeter base, a ring of floodlights in a cow pasture, razor wire shining wet. Inside, Army engineers had dug a moat fed by rerouted creeklet water, pumped to keep flow constant. On the far bank, the Blue Ridge forest stood black and thrumming, a chorus of summer cicadas warped to half speed. The crooked man was singing to us. General Haskins briefed us in a field tent. His eyes were two sleepless pits. Every vine patch we torch regrows by dawn. Our streams clog with green sludge. Dead deer get up and walk. People missing from evac buses reappear in neighbor yards, preaching about crowns and bridges. Whatever you did in Nepal, river plus fire, worked. We need to apply that here at scale. Mark proposed dynamiting the ridge's old logging flumes to flood the valley, but topography funneled water west, not east toward Devil's Elbow. Caroline suggested cloud seeding a stationary storm. Too slow. I listened to the crooked song outside. Its cadence matched a memory. The shape of the gorge below Hollow Mouth, a natural amphitheater funneling wind into a single chute. If we could channel a river into that chute, the wind might spray water as mist over miles of kudzu, holy water in aerosol form. General Haskins exhaled. Only river close enough is the French Broad, 30 miles south. He called a staffer, check reservoir release capacities, rainfall forecast. We had one night before predicted dry spell of weeks. While engineers plotted hydrology, we joined a recon squad patrolling inside the burn zone. I carried Ngawang's recorder, playing his last phrases softly. The vines recoiled from his cauterized voice. Soldiers dubbed it ghost pepper spray. We crossed a pontoon bridge over the moat. Water rushed beneath, smelling of charcoal soap. On the bank, rusted cars formed barricades. Kudzu clung to fenders, pulsing like lungs. Private Ellis torched clusters with a flamethrower. Vines shrieked high, ultrasound slicing eardrums. Deeper, we found a farmhouse swallowed by green. Porch light still glowed. Inside, two elders sat at a kitchen table, eyes black, mouths sewn shut with vine filament, yet humming harmony. The squad radio crackled, orders to detain any infected. We tried restraints. Vines burst from their throats, yanked pins from grenades on Ellis's belt. I dragged him clear, blast dismembered bodies, but vines crawled toward us, using ribs as stilts. Only burning the entire house stopped them. Wood crackled, heat drove vines back into earth. We retreated, boots crunching charred promises. I realized the crooked man fed on every unattended vow. Wedding oaths, mortgage pledges, prayers whispered and forgotten. Appalachia was rich soil soaked in promise breach. The Himalayas' lofty ambition had been desert. Here was the main feast. To starve him, we needed not just water and fire, but a public act of vow-keeping strong enough to cauterize the root system. Next morning, engineers confirmed we could open floodgates upstream, but surge would take hours, and heavy equipment had to cut diversion trenches right through the oldest part of Devil's Elbow, land sacred to local folk. Bulldozers already tried. Drivers vanished, machines found idle with vines growing through air filters. We scouted the route with a drone. Over the gorge's throat stood Blood Rock, a limestone spire carved with petroglyphs, crooked Ys everywhere. That pillar worked like a spiritual keystone. Topple it, and perhaps the woven gateway collapses, but legend said any who struck Blood Rock would die within a day. Another promise to lure fools. I volunteered. Caroline, eyes bandaged from new vine scratches, objected. Mark weighed the legend. If curses were real, they were binding contracts. Maybe we could invert the curse. Instead of breaking the rock, we would recarve it, a new rune of closure, a promise kept. I found an old chisel in the engineer kit, hiked toward the spire under escort. Kudzu parted before Ngawang's recorder, still playing Tibetan prayers. Overhead, clouds brewed. French broad release scheduled at 1600 hours. I had 4 hours to cut stone. At Blood Rock base, petroglyphs writhed, shadows twisting, voices whispered, "Crown the watch." I climbed, hands bleeding on sharp cast, hammered chisel into surface, carving a spiral reversed, mouth closing, not opening. Each strike sent lime dust swirling, forming faces of dead friends. Garrett's grin flickered. I kept carving, chanting, debt paid upward. Thunder rolled, first dam gate opened far away. Ground vibrated. Kudzu around the pillar writhed, slashing at my boots. Soldiers torched roots, but flame blew back on swirling wind. Vines climbed my ankles, burning as they touched chisel, tool now hot as branding iron. Stone cracked. A chunk sloughed, revealing fresh strata beneath, pale and unmarked. I carved crooked Y backward, turned branches inward, a man unbending. Final tap. Dust plume erupted, streaming upward like a reversed waterfall, and vines retreated with a hissing sound. Promise rewired. Sirens wailed valley-wide. The second floodgate had stuck. Engineers used det cord to blow hinges. Water roared down tributaries, meeting our diversion ditch at perfect angle. The gorge inhaled a sonic boom of mist. Clouds split, rain hammered, nature joining the war. I rappelled off the spire as the first wave foamed into the hollow mouth. Trees snapped, vines shredded, body puppets swept off their feet. Their mouths opened, but water rammed inside, tearing roots from sinuses. Green boots surfaced once, eye sockets flooding, helmets spinning away. He sank among driftwood ghosts. Lightning struck Blood Rock tip. New rune glowed amber. Soldiers cheered, then ducked as gust tore tents. Flood spray rose, soaking hillside. Kudzu patches wilted on contact, turning grey within seconds. The crooked choir fell silent, replaced by frog croaks returning after days of ash. Yet victory had a pulse. I felt it echo under mud. The crooked man's root brain still alive, retreated deeper, waiting dry season. Floods recede, promises regrow. We needed the final act, bind him with an oath he could not twist. That night, the valley steamed, moonlight shining over mist like silver milk. All civilians safe in shelters. Caroline and Mark approached me at a campfire, faces streaked with river mud. "We made a promise on Annapurna Base years ago," Mark said softly. "To marry if we both summited together. We never did. Promise broke. Maybe that fed him too." She nodded. "We want to seal it now, right here while his voice is weakest." Chaplain Miller fetched a battered hymnal. Soldiers formed a ring, rifles slung. River murmured behind. I stood witness, recorder capturing every word. They exchanged makeshift rings, twisted wire coated in vine ash, and spoke vows purposeful, unflinching. When the chaplain said, "Whom God joins, let no crooked thing sunder," the wind paused, as if the mountain night took a breath. A breeze swept camp, warm, pine-scented, but free of kudzu musk. Somewhere distant, limestone cracked in a dry, defeated snap. I realized we'd weaponized promise-keeping. If enough people renewed oaths, marriage, service, truth, the crooked man's food supply would starve. But someone had to broadcast that cure wider than any radio hijack. Engineers rigged a microwave relay on the Blood Rock spire, now stable. Its dish pointed at NOAA satellites bouncing to global networks. I climbed once more, Nga Wang's recorder slung at my neck, carrying a laptop wired into the dish. General Haskins patched Washington, CDC, BBC, even amateur ham nets. I pressed record. "This is Cameron Bates, survivor of Everest and Appalachia. The threat is not a virus but a broken covenant. Burn vines, flood roots, but above all, keep your promises. Say them aloud. Carve new ones in stone. The crooked man feeds on our forgetfulness. We refuse him a banquet." The relay beamed signal into star-sprayed sky. Static fought, then parted. Stations worldwide echoed back. Message received. Churches rang bells. Firefighters opened hydrants in parades of flow. Couples renewed vows on front porches. Soldiers repeated oaths of enlistment with tears reflecting bonfire light. Below, Valley Kudzu glowed dull ember, reclined like a beast, tranquilized, but not dead. Tomorrow, new lies could awaken him. The war would demand constant vigilance, eternal voiceover. I climbed down, legs trembling. Caroline and Mark danced barefoot in damp grass, laughter mingling with cricket chirps unwarped at last. For the first time since South Cole, I breathed without tasting pine sap rot. Dawn painted ridges rose gold. Water withdrew, leaving silt patterns shaped like closed spirals. Blood Rock's rune faded to chalk. Work done. General Haskins offered us medivac, but we declined. "The story isn't over," I said. "People will forget. The crooked man counts on it. Someone has to remind them." He nodded, handed me an encrypted sat phone. "Call when you need fire or flood. We'll answer." We three survivors, journalist, climber, scientist, began walking the ridge trail toward villages where promises still frayed. We carried flares, seed vials for antidote research, and a wedding certificate signed in river mud. On the wind, I heard faint banjo strings. Not malevolent, just memory. I spoke to the air. Debt paid upward. Stay buried. The air answered only with birdsong, pure and unslowed. But I kept Ngawang's recorder running, because even quiet mornings need witnesses. 2 ridgelines away, the hollow mouth steamed like a healing scar under new sun. Behind us, the French Broad glistened, flowing fast, flowing true. As long as rivers run and vows hold, the crown remains broken. Yet crowns can be mended by careless hearts. So we walk, and we speak, and we keep watch. Chapter 8. The Watcher's Logbook. I write these lines by lantern light inside an old fire tower perched on Black Balsam Knob. Below me, the Blue Ridge folds like ink-dark waves. The tower's cab is stripped of glass, but the frame still stands, creaking whenever night wind nudges the girders. I chose this place on purpose. A watchtower keeps two promises at once, to see and to warn. The crooked man hates promises that hold. My small radio hisses beside the lantern. Caroline and Mark sleep on the planked floor, curled in their army blankets, wedding rings cut from mulberry root gleaming warm. I volunteered for the final watch. My hands shake. Exhaustion, altitude, memory. But the stylus keeps moving. Ngawang's recorder lies open, its tape nearly full. When I finish this chapter, I will let the reel spin out and click so anybody who finds it knows the telling is complete. At sundown, the ridge pulsed with life. Katydids, tree frogs, cicadas. Then, right at the switch of dusk into full dark, their song bent out of tune, half speed, like a vinyl dragged by a sleepy finger. I recognized the rhythm. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 pulses. Morse for our cursed word. Switchback. I flicked the lantern off, laid flat on the roof. Down in the rhododendron thickets, fireflies winked, but some glowed an eerie green that never blinked. Kudzu sprouts, seeking altitude, very young, hardly thicker than kite string, but they climbed stems of goldenrod with purpose. Proof the crooked man still whispered under the soil. I radioed General Haskins's frequency. Static answered. Then a voice I hadn't heard in weeks. Sergeant Ruiz, the loadmaster who'd survived the plane breach. Watcher 1, this is Nightbird. Sensors show localized chlorophyll spike on your grid. You need water or flame. I scanned the slope. Not yet. Negative on strike. Logging activity only. Will monitor. Copy. Det upward. He clicked off. Even the military had adopted our new password, part blessing, part reminder. Hours passed. I cataloged every oath I still owed. I promised Luis's sister I'd tell her how he died, tomorrow. Promised Ngawang I'd see his prayer wheel return to Tengboch when the pass is thaw. Promised Caroline and Mark I'd stand as godparent to any child they might have, someday. Promised myself I'd never summit another mountain if ambition tasted like hubris. Keeping those vows will starve the crooked man of my fear. Break even one, and he'll root in my footprint. Below, the green fireflies faded. Normal fireflies took over, blinking amber, random, honest. I almost allowed myself hope. Then the radio popped again, weak, childlike voice. Cam, you still owe me that summit photo. Garrett, 5 years dead. Same line he spoke atop Everest's crown. The crooked man had salvaged that tape from the ether. I kept the photo, I whispered. I kept you with it. Static sighed, and the voice vanished. No second attempt. Either the thing was probing for weakness or testing whether I would lie. I did not. Promise kept, to remember but not resurrect. At 02 Waonsa clouds swallowed the moon. Black balsam knobs disappeared in velvet. I felt the tower shudder. Wind? No. Roots chafed metal legs. Peered over edge. Kudzu vines, finger-thick, twining the lower rungs, stems wet with night mist. They had grown 20 feet in 3 hours. Water no longer deterred them completely. The crooked man learned with every defeat. I smashed a flare, hurled it baseward. Orange glare lit trunks, sent vines recoiling. Flames etched a perfect circle of retreat. For now, the lesson: promise plus fire plus flow buys time, never victory permanent. I radioed Nightbird, requesting aerial thermogel drop at grid Tango 3. Affirmative. 2 minutes. Rotor thump arrived. A patchy silhouette spraying phosphor gel in a 50-yard ring. Forest floor bloomed blue-white, too hot for spores to ride. The tower creaked, but held. Mark and Caroline never woke. Sometimes love's promise shields sleep better than bunker walls. While the fire line smoldered, I stared at constellations haloed by smoke. No Himalayan double exposure tonight, just North Carolina sky, pure. I spoke into the recorder. I confess envy. Part of me loved the power of summits, the bragging rights. That hunger cracked the door the crooked man used. Now I promise, any height I climb in future will be for rescue, not ego. May the watcher in this tower hold me to account. As soon as words left my lips, a meteor tore the sky, green tail turning silver, burning nickel slicing atmosphere. Omen or physics, it felt like signature approval. At 0430 false dawn tinted eastern clouds, fire perimeter smoldered sweet, cedar scented. Vines lay crisped, their sap solidified into black glass spheres that caught first light. I raked them into a bucket, poured river water over, heard them crack like ice cubes in whiskey. Cracked promises melt. Caroline climbed ladder, mug of instant coffee. She surveyed burn ring, nodded. He tested you. He'll test all watchers, I said. Mark joined, carrying field laptop. Satellite feeds lit the screen, global hotspots shrinking. A map of vines receding in Java, in the Alps, in Andes. Promise renewals broadcasting hourly, people carving inward wise, building running water fountains in town squares. The crooked man still had pockets, reports of cemetery roses whipping into travelers in Spain, but scale had shrunk. We had ripped enough teeth from his crown that he could not bite cleanly. Sun lifted over layers of ridge, gold spilling into our tower like warm rain. Cicadas resumed true tempo. Kudzu ash floated on thermals, glistening and harmless. I pressed stop on Ngawang's recorder. Reel ticked, full. I ejected cassette, labeled it, the Watcher's logbook, fulfilled. Caroline sealed it in mylar, tucked into a weatherproof box under the tower's main girder. If the crooked man ever rises again, the next century will have field notes. Mark unslung a wooden sign he'd carved during road hours. Watchtower, promise fire, flow, truth, keep your word or feed the green. We bolted it above the ladder. Now, listener, yes, you wearing earbuds on a subway, or driving a moonlit highway, or standing alone at a trailhead, hear my final plea. Keep your promises. Water the ones you've neglected. Burn the false vines of lies before they root. Speak your oaths out loud so others can witness and hold you. If you feel the air smell of pine where no pine grows, or radios repeat your private code, drop everything and seek moving water and honest fire. When you pass a graveyard, nod to the sleepers and vow not to disturb their rest. When you summit any ambition, dedicate it to service, not vanity. These simple acts are stronger than any monster. The crooked man thrives on shortcuts and broken words. Deny him the feast. I have walked from Everest's death zone to Appalachia's hollow and survived, but survival is not victory. The only victory is vigilance shared among many eyes, many voices. Become a watcher where you stand. Carve the inward why on your heart, a person bending to lift another, not to break ground for roots that strangle. Promise me that, and the crooked man will find no home in your shadow. Mark descends first, carrying gear for the next ridge patrol. Caroline follows, humming an old French hymn now free of backward lyrics. I shoulder the recorder's empty shell and climb down last, boots ringing on the iron rungs. The fire line is ashes, the streams still run. In distant valleys, church bells chime quarter hour. Each note sounds like a lock clicking shut on a door the crooked man once opened, but keys dangle everywhere. So I walk the ridge, lantern extinguished, trusting sunrise and the honest tread of my companions. I will walk until promises grow roots deeper than any vine of fear. Debt paid upward, crown broken, watch unended.